of us just having a conversation. We try to keep each other on track a little bit. As far as you know, keep bringing up specific topics like or articles that we're and we've been reading or something. But yeah, I mean it's really that's the cool thing about that I like about podcasting is it's just kind of very very kind of free form and not a whole lot of um, I don't know, not a whole lot of setup honestly, but it's more just capturing the conversation. It does with a lot of the preparation part of it, honestly. But it's what a lot of people are doing these days.
So like Brad does the two other podcasts.
Yep.
One's the Rolling Stones like comedy one. He does.
Yep. Yep. I got a comedy one and a.
They just add like ad lib. A story.
Catch Trey Crowder.
Trey Crowder. I don't think so.
He bills himself as the liberal redneck. He's from the Deep South, has a Deep
Nice.
South voice, but he's a progressive lefty.
Okay.
And,
I might have
Google
heard him at some point. Yeah.
Trae, Trey Crowder. He's actually
Trey
been.
Crowder.
He's sometimes on the comedy circuit. He's been here in
Yeah.
Madison.
Yeah.
But
I feel like I've seen a
tremendous-
southern guy
tremendous-
talking about
yeah.
that kind of stuff.
a tremendous. He often refers, for instance, often refers to Trump as akin to a bag of Vaseline,
Nice.
plastic bag full of Vaseline.
Right. Him and there was a lot of great descriptions when what's his name was behind him in the office. Crap, the guy that like looked very alcoholic. You know what I'm talking about? Trump aide in the beginning of the presidency.
Oh yeah.
It seems so long ago
Sean.
now.
You mean like the spokesperson?
Yeah, the alt-right guy.
Oh, the all right.
Bannon, you mean?
Bannon, yeah.
Yeah, he looked really messed up.
Steve Bannon.
Yeah.
He says scary shit too.
Yeah, yeah. I remember SNL, I don't even think they tried to do Bannon as a character. They just had someone in a death outfit behind Trump. Usually they make a character or whatever, but...
Is that, you wanted to use this chair? Is this alright?
Oh.
I'm all right.
Okay.
Go, bud.
Shit. Wait,
Yeah.
y'all, when you record live at work, you don't really, you don't get to see any kind of software in your voice being recorded, right?
No. 'Cause
Okay.
It's behind the glass.
And it's all happening, broadcasting.
But you still, like, hear yourself,
Oh,
right?
sure.
Yeah.
Do you wear
by the
headphones?
way, your
Yeah, that's right.
your headphones would be
What am I
those
talking about?
ones
I've done it-
right
I've
there
done it
with
before.
the...
Which one?
That one. Yep,
Yeah.
that's the one. Yep.
Oh, wait, I think that's might be, yeah, you got it.
And it should be...
Is it on off?
Should be able to hear out of it, I
I
think.
can't hear anything out of mine yet.
Oh, I have the mics muted right
Oh,
now.
gosh.
Who do we want on their own channel? Do you want to be on your own channel?
I don't
Or...
mind.
Well, because I have it hooked up stereo now.
Okay, put Alan on their own channel.
Okay, and Alan is already on his own channel. Cool.
Alright.
I still don't know exactly how that works mixing wise, the
Yeah, right.
left and right thing, but we'll
Yeah.
figure that out.
Alright, yeah.
Yeah, but it is working.
Yeah.
So we should all be able to hear each other fine, and then we'll be able to go in and separate the channels too.
Yeah. So where's is your revolver thing come up on there still?
Oh, well, I
It's not but, is it Revolver Studios?
yeah, this is my logo.
There. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with an extra O in there.
Revolution Lover
Revolver.
is the
Yeah. We'll see if people remember it.
is the thing.
People probably are already having a hard time. Like they usually think it's revolver when they read it.
Right,
You know?
right.
Yeah. But.
Which means who knows who's listening at that point.
Right. But yeah, like without the other O, it's not a palindrome. You know.
It's not a palindrome.
So. Yeah. Yeah, and I need it to be a palindrome for the design.
So
So
yeah,
really, the only reason it's like that is because the design requires it.
it's like between Brad's conversational skills and my a little bit of knowledge about all kinds of politics. We tend to keep stuff going. So I don't know. We've been doing them together so far. The 4 episodes.
Yeah, we got 4 going right now. And wait, can you hear yourself?
Brad used to be in a Christian rock band, so he knows how to
a long time
keep it
ago.
rolling. Just
Changed quite a bit since then. But
so yeah, we were talking about like
let me get that rolling.
talking about Venezuela, possibly, and then what were some of the other topics that we like toyed with?
Oh, and then hold on, let's check the levels quick too.
Okay.
Yeah, my levels look good. I was already doing this. You want speaking to the mic, just conversationally level?
I like to speaking to the mic conversationally.
Be cool.
It
And
looks
then,
like I'm on the same channel. Though.
Could you say a sentence or two?
A sentence or two.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
It looks like. Well, yeah, you know how to
I
come
bet.
through and stuff.
Yeah, I've done it.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like your levels are pretty good there.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the levels are looking alright. Yeah, it looks a little different because of the 2-channel thing. So like the up top, those lines are me and you, and then the bottom lines are just him.
Was there some bottom lines at all? Yeah, I see.
Yeah,
some.
there's a few.
I-
Well, he hasn't been talking much yet,
Hey, I wasn't even there, Your Honor. I didn't say a word.
so. I plead the 5th. Yeah, see, there he is. There he is.
All right.
Oh, so it's not like radio, so I can edit out tons of stuff.
Yeah,
all the
that's
time.
that's one of the nice things about it.
We have a SoundForge at the station, of course.
Yeah.
What's a SoundForge?
SoundForge is a electronic editing capacity that replaced literal cutting and pasting tape.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Editing tape by
Yeah.
I mean, I would go. It's not that long ago that we still had to sit in the station with a razor blade coming through.
You were doing that? Did you do that?
Yeah, editing
Oh,
tape.
shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember hearing
You know,
stories
yeah.
about that stuff all the time. Yeah.
And SoundForge, which is here in Madison, revolutionized radio editing.
Okay. So was that like one of the first like ways to do that digitally?
Right, digitally, right.
Wow.
And it's
Yeah,
so
that's so
it's-
important.
and it's so very advanced now
Yeah.
that people that have a facility with it, a capacity with it, just zoom.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's
'Cause
awesome.
what you could do is magnify, expand, so that you can take out seconds. You can edit out.
Oh yeah.
Anything.
Like pauses that are too long. Yeah, I've definitely done that a few times. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Stammers and
Yeah.
and
Now
just
those-
take out. You can literally take out a second. You can take out
Mhm.
2 seconds.
Yeah. No, sometimes you do find yourself doing that with the podcasting too. So
Right.
yeah, it's pretty much just it's
Yeah,
a lot
so
like
yeah.
radio.
Yeah, SoundForge
It's
is still
just-
here in Madison, but
Yeah.
lots of other companies came up afterwards, so
Yeah.
they're one of those they had during that what's it called?
The .com boom.
You
Yeah. That's
yeah,
that is
yeah,
what
during
it's
the
commonly referred
yeah,
to.
Then they took the .com bust.
Right.
But
Yeah.
they were doing quite well, and still listed.
Well, yeah. I mean, that was like revolutionary. It came out, but now there's so many, so many people doing that.
Right.
So I mean,
This is the same thing
Yeah.
basically.
Right,
yeah.
right.
GarageBand. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like I mean, GarageBand. This wasn't available when I was a kid.
Right,
You
no.
know, and
And I've actually heard of GarageBand.
yeah. It's it's free when you have a Mac. So I mean, it's
Which I do.
Yeah, that's what's nice about it. Like, I mean, that's why I've been able to just, start with, little to no resources and just do it because I was like, I got this older Mac that, was, good enough for
Mhm.
recording, and GarageBand's free. So, I mean, it's like limited, I mean, I can only have one channel to work with. Like, I can't make like, 4 different channels for 4 different mics at the same time. But if you're doing like podcasting or real simple music stuff, it's great. So, yeah, I mean, this stuff was not available when I was a kid though. So it was like maybe halfway through high school, this stuff started cropping up a lot more. like more people being, proficient at Photoshop and like, doing their own little recording things on their own, in their at home and stuff.
We got generations represented. 'Cause
Yeah, that's
Brad's
true.
so
Yeah,
funny.
yeah.
Oh,
I'm 30. Yep, yep, yep.
I just turned 70 in February.
Okay, yeah.
Or
And
as
then,
I tell people, I lived through the 60s twice.
oh wow.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And then do you want to say or?
Yeah, no, I'm 39. I'm 40. So I got 10
Yeah,
years.
so we
in
got a
between.
pretty good span here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice.
Cause yeah, and then another company out of Madison that did a good digital thing is what is it? Acid Fruity Loops. They did it's another company that's
Yeah, I remember Fruity Loops
for
being
making beats. And
all
shit.
all my friends that
They're
knew
out of
how to do
Madison as
that
well.
were making
That
beats
was
on Fruity Loops.
That was like one of the first ones as well. So we got that going on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, then everyone started making apps, and then you got just random high schoolers making these apps and stuff, and just eventually take off. It's crazy. There's so many options for creativity right now.
So Alan was probably, but you were talking about putting your shows, because his work shows, and
Yeah.
just putting in podcasts.
Yeah, yeah.
And-
Some people do that.
And
Because
I
some
think
people
it'll
do both. They'll record.
But it'll basically make it accessible to all social media, because then I could take that and tweet it, and it would make it more accessible.
At this point, of course, no one hears no one hears anything that's being done at Ward unless they go to the Ward sites.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, yeah.
A public affair, the program I do every Thursday. It's all archived. All of my programs. At
Yeah.
this point, probably hundreds of programs at this point.
Yeah.
Are sitting there, and a lot of the stuff is very current, it's very hot. I get a good left audience. I've established connections with various authors and
Yeah.
editors and politicos, commentators, and so on.
Yeah. I've heard your stuff. It's great.
And so and there's a couple people at the station have been talking about podcasting this stuff, and I have no clue what that even means.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Uh-huh.
Or how to do it.
Yeah.
So this, sitting here tonight is kind of a little intro for me.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Well, and your archives it'd be really easy to get that into podcasting format. I mean, you just have to basically, get on Anchor or any number of services and just upload them, and once it's on there, people can find them on Stitcher and Spotify and all those places people
Right.
listen to them.
I mean, they're all available through the SoundCloud. Is that what it's called?
So, yeah, SoundCloud. Yeah. Uh-huh.
They're all available. They're there now in that
Yeah.
format.
Yeah. Well, the challenge these days is, I guess which I'm learning right now is getting them on a multitude of formats. That's really the challenge. Is finding a service where that can plug it into these, because unfortunately people listen. Well, I guess fortunately and unfortunately people listen to them in different apps in different ways.
So every week, usually within, sometimes almost immediately, but usually within a couple hours anyway of my Thursday program, the current techie at the station, she sends me an email with all those links. Right?
Yeah.
There's 4, 5, 6 links where it's available now.
Yeah.
And like I said before, I didn't even know what a good part of that
Okay.
means.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's already at a few core spots
Right.
probably.
But
Yeah.
again,
SoundCloud.
I think you have to go to the Word pages to grab that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's like a work SoundCloud page, or not in our backyard. That's your
No,
public
it's
affairs.
public affairs,
Is
yeah.
it a public affairs SoundCloud page, or is it a work SoundCloud page?
Well, you can go to the public affairs site, and they're all available.
Okay.
So
All right. Yeah, because
Okay.
sometimes they're easier playable. They're easier to play right inside of a tweet if they're uploaded in the podcast form in an RSS feed. SoundCloud's pretty easy to share too, but
Yeah.
it'd be nice to have your own account on SoundCloud even for that.
Well, actually, if you on the public affair archive page,
Mm-hmm.
If you click on my name, all of my programs
Okay.
come up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you guys got have a pretty good site, considering like that's what we need. People need websites to operate these days. You guys got a pretty good site for a day.
Yeah, but like
you can find stuff.
for
But yeah,
finding
it's,
Alan's material, it's kind of like lost and buried.
And on the website?
Yeah.
Oh, is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I think like what
There's a separate public affair page,
All right.
right?
Yeah.
And then at the top are the 5 hosts with photos.
Okay.
And you
Yeah.
click on my name and you go to everything I've done.
Bam.
Yeah. I was gonna say,
Yeah.
so it's there and,
It's
and
there.
stuff, but like the issue I guess with I don't know, millennials and people is that they have the different ways that they listen to stuff.
Yeah, and when you do a podcast in the RSS feed, it can show up like tons of fucking places.
Well, yeah, you can plug that in a lot of places, and then
Yeah.
it will go to that RSS feed or whatever. But we're really
Yeah.
getting into the nitty gritty.
We are so like it was so are you so but you're interested in having a podcast that's just your radio or also creating other content as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is that again. This is so totally new to me. That it'd be good, of course, to get my interviews out to a broader audience, a much larger universe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, if that proceeds, then doing more regular, I was going to say original. It's all original stuff, but
Yeah.
lining up guests,
Mm-hmm.
doing interviews on the phone, or doing interviews with local activists or people coming through town.
Yeah. Well, and podcasting allows you to kind of be really creative with your format and change your format up if you want to, and because you don't have to fit within like an hour. You don't have to fit commercial breaks. There's you can really, if you have like a specific radio show idea or whatever, you can just kind of try it out and mess
So
with it.
how's it picked up?
I'll make an episode and then I'll put it on SoundCloud and post it on Anchor, which puts it on Spotify and all those places. And then right now, I'm not doing a whole lot of like targeted ads or anything like that. I'm just kind of sharing it with people that I know, and involving people that I know in it. And I mean, my favorite podcasts have grown because of small, specific groups of people that are maybe all over the place, but it's kind of slow build. I find from a lot of podcast hosts that talk about it, so it's like a slow build. But when you have that base, they'll come back every week for an episode. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I have thousands or maybe tens of thousands of followers on if you add up all my social media accounts, and so I share it with them over and over again, and a few of them listen to it. It's surprising. I got 33 views on this hour and 40-minute podcast, and they don't count it as a view unless you do listen to quite a lot of it. So
Yeah.
that's working for me. You already have a bunch of folks that would want to find it, and it would just make it easier.
Well, yeah, I'm sure if you mentioned it on your radio show, there would be at least a handful of people that would just tune in from that.
And then I have, at this point, I have in quotes almost 3,700 friends on Facebook.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's and that's a broad. That's everything from old hometown, high school buddies, and family.
Yeah.
Various tiers, levels, of course.
Yeah.
But also people that are liking what I do politically, what I post, and so on. And,
But yeah, also
Yeah.
part of it. What is the social networking part that he was kind of mentioning, retweeting, liking stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Doing the. That's the part I'm not as good at personally.
See what I do each week now is that as soon as the archive of my program is up, I put that on my Facebook page.
Do you get a lot of
Yeah,
engagement?
yeah,
Right.
that's good.
Do a lot of folks like it and stuff, or do you find less than when you just because usually Facebook rewards you if you just make original content with words and not links. Do you find that that's true?
Oh, is that? I don't know how that stuff works at all. So
Like if you just make some statement on there, it'll
A
show it to lots of your
funny-
friends. But if you have a link,
A funny thing happened. You know, I had this a Google blog, and it's called Rough Talk.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, you know, and it's sporadic. Whenever I write something, I put it up, you know, for some other venue, for journalistic stuff.
yeah.
But a month or so ago, I just went to the stats page for the Google blog,
oh yeah,
and I noticed that there was, you know, I was getting all these hits, and you can see they actually have a map. Google has a map. You can see where in the world people are tuning in from.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah. That's always
And
cool.
but they also have the URLs that people are coming through.
Oh yeah, you
Right.
know, yeah.
Yeah,
So Anchor has something
Right.
very similar. Yeah.
Right. So I noticed I was looking at the URLs, and I see in several of them the word porn,
Oh,
and I'm thinking, so what the hell? And I don't want to click on them.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
You don't know who the hell it is or whatnot.
yeah.
But then it
especially
dawned
if
on
you're
me.
at work.
But it suddenly dawned on me. Of course they're looking at my site, Rough Talk.
Oh right.
Oh. I see.
Yeah,
Did you stick with Rough Talk?
yeah.
I was gonna say I would still stick with it after
Sure.
that because I mean that's
Sure.
it's a nice subliminal
Yeah.
thing, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, and my last name is Rough, of course.
Oh yeah. Oh. Yeah. You know we this is an oddly specific thing. We had a member of the ISO whose last name was Below, and
Oh,
we
yeah.
really.
Alan knows Michael Below.
Oh, you know.
Don't
Okay.
you? Or maybe not. Never mind.
I don't know if we ever pitched it to
You might have
him,
made him.
but like we always wanted to put together like a socialism from below podcast. You know, because his last name's Below.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. We never ended up putting anything together, but it was a great idea.
Yeah,
Something to write down.
yeah.
But yeah, I was gonna say that the so I can see also on the Anchor thing kind of who like where in the world people are listening to me
Yeah,
from. So it shows me like the geographic locations here and like where on the internet they're listening to me, like what apps they're using and stuff. So yeah, there's each site that does this has their own way of showing you your stats, but it's really cool to like, oh, what someone in Australia is listening to me for some reason. You know.
What is working, what is not. So I think Brad might be willing to like get your shit up there for you.
Oh yeah,
I
absolutely.
think,
I mean, yeah,
you know,
I'm trying to put whatever podcast up that I can. So
on this like network.
yeah, and I mean, because if you take what you're doing at WRT and get the the
You
sound
can-
file or something,
He can get himself off of the or
then
like,
you can just
or
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was going to ask. Can you?
or I
I,
could.
I assume, of course, you have the capacity just to grab those my archive programs off of the Wart site and put them on yours.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'd basically create a page for you or whatever, and
Mhm.
then yeah, I'd start posting them on that page, and then I'd let you know all the login stuff and all that, so that you could check it out yourself.
Or edited.
Yeah.
But yeah, that page would allow you to build like your own brand separate from work, because I think that'd be a good way to get a.
Well, yeah, I mean
good
nowadays
audience.
you don't really have to you don't have to choose between. You can kind of do everything. It's because there's all these like sites that you can post like content on. So yeah, I would if I were you, I'd start with just taking your radio show and just posting it on like as a podcast.
You say you have
with,
hundreds of episodes? Like
I don't-
one a week, obviously. 54 a year.
Say 50 a year.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I've been
yeah,
doing
yeah.
it, and I've been doing it for approaching 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Take the last 5 years and you have like
It's a lot of
250
content already.
episodes.
Yeah.
You could put out like one every weekday
Yeah.
for like a year or
But, I mean,
something.
right, but
on the podcast.
and I've done some of the some great voices out there. Tariq Ali,
Yeah.
Henry Giroux, Chris Hedges.
Fuck.
Oh, wow, cool.
Yeah.
I would say you could even take some of your old content, revisit it, and have like a retrospective almost on
Right.
a few old like select stories or interviews that you really like. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because some people do like podcasts that do weekly episodes. sometimes we'll do like best of episodes where they like just kind of go over like kind of the best little vignettes from their podcast throughout the year or something.
Yeah, there's this great African American historian named Gerald Horn,
Yeah.
who's probably written now probably close to 40 books.
Oh wow.
And he's kind of,
Yeah.
he, you know, he's a black communist, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so he's kind of on a continuum of black scholars, black activist scholars, public intellectuals
Uh-huh.
that in the well, analogous paralleling the mainstream media, they don't exist.
Yeah.
And they're historically
far
been
and few in
relegated.
between.
Yeah, historically relegated to the periphery of the academy.
Right.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But and I've had him on, and people said, "Whoa," because he's on fire.
Uh-huh.
He's just
Yeah.
he has this. Well, I described it as a mission that is this overall reappraisal
Uh-huh.
of U.S. history. When we learn,
Yeah. Yeah.
when we learn U.S. history, there's something called African American history that is presented almost as a sidebar, or
Yeah.
sub-discipline.
Uh-huh.
Right? He, starting with the colonial period in the American Revolution, and I actually said to him on the air at one point, I said, I understood this abstractly,
Yeah.
that there's no way of understanding U.S. history without that African American story.
Yeah.
Central,
Uh-huh.
not peripheral, but central to. There's no way to understand race and class without
Yeah.
replacing that struggle.
Yeah.
And he's done this thing on called his most significant book probably to date. He's done a ton of stuff. Came out a few years ago called The Counter Revolution of 1776.
Yeah.
And the question for the book, or the central question, is what forged the coalition between Southern planters and Northern merchants that became the founding fathers? Right?
Was it Haiti?
Well, Haiti.
Was it?
Haiti. Yeah, he's written this great book about Haiti.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
It's
Uh-huh.
taking off from C.L.R. James.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we learned, they don't do it anymore, but when I was a kid, you had to study U.S. history in high school, and you learned about the
Uh-huh.
Stamp Act, Congress, and all these grievances that people had against the crown. And Horn, and he's not the only one, but Horn brings the story central to say that the final coalition that became the coalition of the Declaration of Independence and the Revolutionary War was forged when the first talk began in London of the abolition of the slave trade.
Yeah.
Right. That's the thing. Then it got serious.
Uh-huh.
Right, because the merchants northern merchants were dependent upon it. The whole Atlantic trade,
Uh-huh.
the baseline,
Yeah.
the
It was a big part of
baseline
their
entire
economy, their whole
global economy
global
was the
thing,
slave
yeah.
trade.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've had Horn on, and I had him on recently, where he's very intense and very. He's on Real News often.
Okay.
I thought I heard of him.
But he's intense.
Yeah.
And I'm in the middle of this interview, and he starts chuckling. And he's kind of laughing.
Yeah.
And then something dawned on me that I said, I think I said something like, it's good to hear you laugh, And I realized that why he was laughing was that his laugh was nothing more nor less than, this white boy gets it. It's like, somebody gets it, good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's some great history being done now.
Yeah, well, there's a lot more people are aware of like the people's history of the United States,
Right.
which goes into like greater detail on the Revolution, than just what we have in our basic history books.
Right. And of course,
high school.
Zinn's brilliance was that as an activist, he synthesized a lot of the stuff that the lay historian or the lay person, it's not going to pick up on.
Well,
And-
it's that ugly stuff that we prefer to not dwell on in a lot when we're talking about American history. You know what I mean? Like we prefer to think that we're past all the negative shit. You know, like civil rights is behind us, slavery is behind us. You know, we like to like frame it that way.
You
You know.
like dominant to American ideology, and it's playing out right to this moment around the crisis around Venezuela,
Mm-hmm.
is this notion of American exceptionalism.
Yeah.
It starts with the the city on a hill, this new world experiment that's going to be a beacon, and this democratic experience that's carved out of the wilderness, and it becomes a very arrogant kind of not having old world ills, not having feudalism. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so on. This kind of ideal for the rest of the world to look up to. That we don't have those old world class conflicts and so on. That's part of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Classes
We're better
classes,
than that.
Well, I grew up in I was coming up as a kid during the Cold War. That classes, that's old stuff. Classes don't exist. Everyone has an opportunity here.
Yeah.
And it's a very a complex of thinking that leads to an arrogance of we are exceptional, and if you don't buy our brand,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Then we'll shove it down your throat.
Well, it's like I think that also a lot of people get a really common thing I see with I don't know people is they get meritocracy and democracy confused. You know what I mean? They like switch those terms around. Meritocracy being like like your value is determined on how hard you work and like what you can gain from that work. You know what I mean? Whereas like. But they kind of like talk about democracy as if that's how democracy is supposed to work. You know what I mean?
But of course we have a meritocracy. After all,
Yeah,
if you
that's
have
what
enough,
we really.
If you have enough money,
yeah.
you can get your kid's head photoshopped and as a member of a sports team to get into an Ivy League school.
yeah.
And people say, "Gee, what the hell's going on?" He said, "Oh, there hasn't always been legacy enrollments. George Herbert Walker Bush, that bumbling idiot, can go
Yeah.
go to
Trump.
Yale, C student, become president of the United States."
Yeah.
And did Trump even go to college?
Yeah, he's good. He went to a very good business school. Did very good. Had very good grades.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah,
Yes.
he
Excellent.
he did go to
100%.
he did go to Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania in the business school there.
Okay.
I don't know about his undergrad.
Yeah. I say that's pretty much a requirement, right?
Yeah, but you were talking
At least
about
having gone through college.
you were talking about the synthesis of Zinn's work. Like, couldn't help but pick up on that Marxist terminology there that you used.
Synthesis.
Yeah. Thesis, antithesis, and synthesis.
Yeah.
Hegel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, what about? So you were talking about Venezuela, right? I know you had been involved in a couple of actions in town around Venezuela. How do those go and things?
Knowing what I do about the long history of U.S. foreign policy, going back over many decades, especially in the Western Hemisphere, it became obvious to me that this is, at some level, it's the same old story. Right?
Yeah.
That is this getting back to that exceptionalist worldview that the U.S. has the right to intervene, and it's a selective intervention always. It's masked in terms of democracy, masked in terms of humanitarian intervention.
Mm-hmm.
There's all these fantastic historical quotes. Well, these people can't be trusted with governing themselves. After all, they'll mess it up. But there's this kind of imperial worldview that says then the entire 20th century is an arc of intervention in the Western Hemisphere, extending back to wherever you want to jump off. That is a common jumping off place is the Spanish-American War. And,
Yeah.
There's, I don't know.
I forget what
I don't know.
years that.
1898.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there's this story, and I don't know how apocryphal it is, and I remember seeing references to it, that at one point, at the time when President William McKinley, he's wringing his hands about what to do. The battleship Maine has been blown up. We don't know exactly. Historians still debate what happened with the Maine. And if somebody did it, who did it, and so on.
The Maine.
But there's this crisis over the Maine, and there's this story that McKinley, not knowing what to do or indecisive, he turns at night in the White House. He prays at bedtime, and he. I'd love to find the source on it again. I remember reading it years ago. And there's this like divine intervention that he recounts. I think it's in his diaries, where he prays and God comes to him.
Oh, wow.
In some form. Oh, yeah.
Just comes right down.
Yeah. And tells him to take Cuba. Right? And
God's like, I need some Cubans,
I need some.
and I'm clearly American.
Yeah. We'll brag. I want to come back to Cuba because it's a real important story. But I think it might have been Zinn recounts this. I'm not sure. I can't remember. But tells him that you might as well take the Philippines.
Yes.
Yeah, God's just like over his shoulder.
And that turns into a
slaughter.
A slaughter in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Cuba, if you look, there's a lot of people, even erstwhile good social democrats and liberals, who buy into a certain amount of the American mission. If only it didn't stray from the path. If only we didn't have these aberrations like Vietnam.
As if that's the
who
problem.
Who look to the founding fathers, and they certainly the first presidents, the Virginians, were always had their eyes on Cuba. This desire there was talk going back to the early Republic period of Cuba's the next logical republic or state.
Those positions
and it's
really.
never stopped. And it's never stopped.
His position's very strategic.
Going back, Gerald Horne's discussion, he has a couple books in the past 3-4 years, one on Haiti and one on Cuba. And they're the relationship of the U.S. in Cuba, the U.S. and Haiti from the very early moments forward. And very fantastic stuff. And in that continuity, that longer arc of history, it's like, oh, okay. The question comes up with Cuba all the time. Why? It's continued animosity.
Right? Once you start getting to the root of it, it's like a lot more complicated.
But at some point, it's almost, I don't want to psychologize it, but there's this kind of vindictiveness. A kind of, that becomes irrational at some level.
It's the one that got away.
Right. And now, even at this moment, around the Venezuela business, the past couple of months, two stories I just got a kick out of in a kind of weird, macabre sense. One is that what's the name? Secretary of State.
They keep. Is that one stayed the same?
Pompeo.
That's it. You got
Pompeo
it.
says,
He's the second one, right?
Right. But
XCIE.
So hard to keep track.
Right. But Pompeo actually said straight-faced that there are Iranian Hezbollah terrorist cells in Venezuela.
Oh wow.
Now,
Oh jeez, that's an arc, right?
Well, here's the incredible thing. There is no such thing as Iranian Hezbollah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was about to say, like,
Right?
there's something right there.
Yeah. And
If you just
But-
throw a bunch of words together and people
sure,
buy it.
but the other is this notion that it becomes translated down, condensed down to for mass consumption to democracy versus dictatorship.
Well, that's what we always boil it down to.
Right. Well, and I, you know, we were talking earlier. Imagine if that was a guide to U.S. foreign policy. Because, gee, why aren't we going after Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, that's the glaring question. That's the
Gee,
the million
Duterte,
trillion-dollar
yeah,
question.
Duterte in the Philippines. Why
Yeah.
are we butting up? Why are we butting up to Bolsonaro, to this right-wing regime in Colombia? This forging of a coalition of what I call a coalition of the swilling.
Yeah, I like that.
That some of the most anti-democratic, authoritarian types, line up, and then they call it something. The Lima Group now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As if it has nothing to do with. And people like to get too economistic sometimes. That is, it's just oil. No, it's geopolitical.
Yeah.
It's
Like, it's not-
prestige,
Like, that's how far it goes. It's like, oh, well, it's just oil. Come on. Like, it's just the way it works.
Geopolitics.
You know? Which is like, that's not how you should think about that, probably.
I wanted
With
to.
lies at stake.
I was wondering if there was some kind of. It seems like Trump had like pulled, or at least in talking, anyways, like pulled out of sort of the Middle East, where fucking the U.S. has been catastrophizing many economies and cultures and societies for many a dozen, or for over a dozen years now, and then at the same time there's this focus back, like here in our continent, which is sort of like a continuum. So and then it was interesting that you talked about the Iranian Hezbollah too. Because they're because I guess they're like trying to, maybe that's like a way that they're using sort of all of this sort of stuff they built up against folks in the Middle East and trying to point it over here in the Middle East, in Latin America, and like use that to sway the public or something like that. Is it?
Yeah, part of that.
Yeah.
Part of that. That trope that Iranian Hezbollah's terrorist cells. The
It's
key, of course, is
So
terrorism.
70s,
Yeah.
isn't it?
It's especially when you have "cell" at the end.
Yeah,
Like, it's real
terrorist.
serious.
Yeah, and it's fear, a kind of fear mongering.
It's like a dog whistle
Yeah,
kind of thing.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
The aha,
Hmm.
and what's astounding, of course, is that it reaches so many millions of people that I was talking with my wife just about this the other day, that the first time during the Republican primaries,
Yeah.
right, when they would have these so-called debates, right,
Yeah.
I said at the time that Trump is going to be president.
Yeah.
Why? Because he's going to be the first reality TV president. Understands the media, has played that already.
Yeah.
His presence, his pose, his almost gangster-like, one of these men in suits kind of. I'm a tough guy.
Well, he's an extreme.
Yeah.
You know.
Right.
Yeah.
And this whole standing on its head of I'm going to spew fake news and call any opposition to what I do fake news.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this pitch to the common folk. I recently had on this marvelous historian on my program on Word. I had Greg Grandin. He's a great, marvelous historian. And I asked him, he has a new book out about the role of the frontier in forging, if there's such a thing, American culture or American, what is, the old American studies question, what is an American?
Yeah, that
and I
trick
asked him.
question.
I asked him on the air. If you notice, if you watch closely, whenever there's stuff going on at the White House, quite often whoever's in office poses before a former president who they see as hold in high regard. And Trump often poses now before portraits of Andrew Jackson.
Oh, wow.
And I asked Greg Gren about Jackson. There's actually a whole chapter on Jackson in this new book, and it's because there's this liberal mythology about Andrew Jackson that he was the first president that invited the common man into the White House. At his inaugural, they opened up the doors, and all these border ruffians and frontier people and the common people were invited in, and they made a mess of the place and broke the china and whatnot. You know, it's very famous. A matter of fact, one of the great liberal historians coming off of the New Deal went on to become an apologist for John Kennedy, Arthur Schlesinger Jr. His first book, the book that put him on the map, was called The Age of Jackson. It was the great new democracy.
Yeah.
But it stood knee deep in blood.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We know of course about the Trail of Tears.
Yes.
But well before the Trail of Tears, Jackson and his freebooting frontiersmen, mercenaries, and so on, slaughtered the Creek Indians. Right?
Yeah.
Waged war against the Seminoles in Florida. Right? He's often seen as, the Battle of New Orleans, the great hero, and so on. But he was a mass murderer.
Yeah.
Right? And for Trump now and it's all conscious. It's no accident that he happens to set the cameras up in the rostrum in front of this party. Just prior, not with Obama, but with Bush, there was this resurrection, really, resuscitation of Teddy Roosevelt. You know,
Yeah.
Another.
People still talk somewhat positively about Teddy Roosevelt.
They do, but he was also
Because the national parks or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that was his big fight.
Of course Panama was snatched away and separated off so that they could dig the canal. But the hero of San Juan Hill.
Well, of course they had to have that that connection between the two oceans. They just had to have.
As part of the great progressive liberal pantheon is Woodrow Wilson. And Woodrow Wilson, under Woodrow Wilson, for the first time ever, the federal bureaucracies and agencies in D.C. were segregated. He was a Southerner to the max. One recent biographer into the smoking room where they would have cigars, and Woodrow Wilson would tell in dialect darky jokes.
Oh, Jesus!
Right. His entire cabinet was comprised of white Southerners. Primarily Texans.
Yeah.
And he held a white supremacist notion of civilization, that civilization was defined by this hierarchies with of course white Anglo-Saxon or Nordic peoples being at the top.
Was Wilson in the early 1920s?
1912 to...
Yeah, I was going to say, that was really popular in the world a lot right then. Kind of inadvertently led to some of the Nazi stuff, that ideology of races and hierarchies.
Right, well, the eugenics movement was
it was really popular
during the period.
People always forget, it wasn't just in Germany that stuff was picking up. It was all over the place.
It was, now there's enough of the history known that we know just some recent books written about how the Nazis basically adopted their legal codes from stuff that had already been existed in the United States.
Well,
they sent its social scientists and experts to study Jim Crow structures and institutions in the U.S. South.
Yeah, I've been reading Black Reconstruction by W.B. Du Bois.
Oh yeah.
And he really focuses a lot on like Andrew Johnson and basically how he just completely like evolved from when they were talking about like, oh well, you know, I know they're free, but we can't let them vote yet because they don't know anything yet and stuff. So he was like advocating, like he was like taking those, you know, Southern arguments seriously and like letting the Confederacy basically like, you know, influence his every opinion. Like he really like put some seeds in place that like really fucked the whole Reconstruction, you know. But yeah, and what was weird reading it is like the arguments that you keep hearing or he keeps on like putting down from the Confederacy. It sounds like alt right like Trump head
Well,
type
that's-
people. You know what I mean? Like it's that kind of apologizing or saying, you know, the greater good.
Yeah, well, it's
You
interesting
know.
you mentioned that because if you go to this book I just referenced, this Greg Grandin thing called "The End of the Myth: From the Frontier to the Border Wall," he talks about those continuities
Yeah.
that are a pulse beat
Uh huh.
in
Yeah,
in
pulse.
modern
That's a
U.S.
good-
history.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a remarkable book.
Yeah. Yeah. Because yeah, it does keep on coming up. Like we think, you know, we talk about like stuff like it is in the past, and then it just keeps on.
You know, came to the White House. He was a governor of New Jersey for a short time. Up until that time, he was at Princeton, and before that at Johns Hopkins. He was a noted historian of the period, and one of his students was a guy named Thomas W. Dixon. Dixon wrote a book called The Klansman, which was a novel about Reconstruction, in which the Ku Klux Klan were the heroes of the novel. It became the film
Song of the South?
Birth of a Nation.
Birth of a Nation.
the first
D.W.
film.
D.W. Griffith's
That's right.
Birth of a Nation. When it was first shown, they had a premiere showing with Dixon present at the White House, and Wilson invited a bunch of notables, including the entire Supreme Court, members of the Supreme Court, key congressional leaders, and so on. And they had a private screening
Yeah.
at the White House, and then the mass circulated version of the film began with an endorsement by Wilson on the screen, saying this is
Wow. I didn't know he had endorsed it.
yeah, no, the quote is remarkable. He said, this is history engraved in lightning."
Whoa.
Right.
That is.
And at the time, you know, folks, various black civil rights organizations, around, led of course by the NAACP, at the time had pickets, had called for boycotts of the film.
Yeah, of course.
And it was amazing because in the sense that technically it's still studied and fit like that.
Birth of a Nation.
Right.
Yeah.
Because of what Griffith was doing with moving cameras and tracking and so on.
Well,
And
because it was
seeing-
one of the biggest
and-
budget, biggest production
Right. He went on
films at the time,
went on
right?
went on to do bigger things, but even with that, slaves portrayed, or excuse me, freedmen,
Yeah.
free blacks, were portrayed as these vicious rapists and murderers
Yeah, uh-huh,
and so on.
uh-huh.
And even at that point, you see, the blacks that are portrayed in the film are white men in blackface,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and but it's so horrific. But that gives a sense of Wilson. And then the other hero of World War I is who in the war itself is General Blackjack Pershing.
Yeah.
Well, Pershing, there's two regiments that come primarily out of Harlem of black troops, volunteers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when they are sent to Europe, Blackjack Pershing gives the command of these regiments over to the French, actually saying, we can't have our way.
Yeah.
So segregated military, and the French, who, it's not that the French were more humane or more just or whatever. They'd already committed hundreds of thousands of black French colonial troops from Senegal etc., to get slaughtered on the Western Front, Moroccans, Senegalese, and so on.
Yeah.
But that black regiment called the Harlem Hellfighters went on to become the most highly decorated regiment that the Americans put out.
Yeah.
And, so yeah, the racism.
Well, there's so many examples of that, throughout U.S. history is well, like especially like in the Reconstruction book again, like they were willing to put like the slavery stuff behind them, like the freedmen, the freed slaves were like no hard feelings. Like that they were pushing for like legislation to help build or make community schools, public schools that both poor whites and freed slaves would benefit from. Like they were being extremely socially progressive and always trying to like help everyone. Like they never even like took that vindictive approach to it. And it was only the white folk that were putting like I guess externalizing their vindictiveness towards the freed slaves and assuming like, well, if we were in that situation, if we were freed slaves, we'd want to have revenge, so they must be that way too, and it's like, well, no, they were actually willing to work it out for the most part. So, and then like history has so many examples of black folk trying to help the greater good. Like, no, we're gonna make everyone turn on you.
I often paraphrase, there's that famous quote by the Southern novelist, big novelist William Faulkner, where he says, "The past isn't dead; it ain't even past."
Yeah,
right?
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's very good.
Very apt to the U.S. Yeah.
The one of my late great mentor at the University of Wisconsin, the historian Harvey Goldberg, used to say that the popular memory is 15 minutes long. And lots of folks, and he said 15 minutes because it's from one commercial to the next. Right?
Yeah.
And
keeps on getting smaller.
But there's so many folks who think that so much of this. Even I imagine there are folks out there who think that there's been this whole discussion of white supremacy. It's been
ironed out.
But current, that I'm sure folks think, well, this is, gee, the three of us are old enough to remember that in the very early moments of the Obama administration, that there was all this talk about post-racial America.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And there's this marvelous social geographer named Ruth Wilson Gilmore, right? She wrote a very, also works in the prison abolition movement and so on, a good activist, but a good scholar, did a marvelous book on the political economy and sociology of the California prison system called the Golden Gulag. I had her on my work program at one point. This is several years ago already. And I said, well, it was about early in the Obama administration. I said, well, Ruth Gilmore, there's all this talk about post-racial America. What's your take on that? And she said, oh yeah, I get it. We got a brother in the White House and 2 million in the big house.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That summed it up very well.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring it back to a little bit ago. We were talking about about Venezuela and shit. About the. Do you think it's part of Trump's sort of like nationalism or ethno-nationalism that Trump seems to be trying to, at least with this PR, taking the emphasis off of like the Middle East and sort of bringing it home here to Venezuela? Or what's going on with that? Or is that just all an image?
It's hard to say. That is, getting back to that moment about how history gets lopped off. Like there's no continuity. Everything is now Trump.
Yeah.
It was Obama. Was Bush. Remember that
And Clinton.
Clinton. of
Yeah,
course,
there was a
yeah,
scandal
yeah.
that was all over the
Yeah.
news all the time. Yeah.
But keep in mind that the counter-revolution against, no matter what we may think about or how we interpret the nature of the Venezuelan regime, a constant has been from the various early moments of Chavez was that regime has to go. Right? Why? Because it threatens some form of self-determination, which is a threat to U.S. hegemony, is a threat to imperial power, and when you get a guy like John Bolton talking about the Monroe Doctrine, right? That this is the U.S. owns this hemisphere.
Yeah.
And that's getting back to the animosity toward Cuba. Cuba, has outlasted since 1959. It's had a separate route, a separate course.
Yeah.
And despite all its flaws, all its problems, all its warts, still represents some kind of alternative to the North. Years ago I was in, when was that? Early 90s. I was in Cuba in the Rio one evening, a social gathering where there was some political conversation. And we were leaving, and we were going down this black road, the no street lights, to get it back on the trucks that we had come in, and we heard footsteps coming down this dirt road, and we stopped, and this woman who had been in this get together, probably in her mid 70s, maybe 80 years old, came up to us, and you could tell she wanted to tell us something. She had something to say that she felt was so important. She chased after us.
Yeah.
And she said, mira, dígalos en el norte que nosotros no regresamos a esclavitud. Tell the people in the north that we will not return to slavery.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a damn moment. It was like,
Yeah.
Never counted that. I'll never forget that woman.
Yeah.
I've been there a number of times, to Cuba a number of times since. But that epitomized, she was old enough to remember pre-revolution Cuba. Right? Another instance there, I went on a trip with the, kind of blurs now because it's a while ago, but there was a sizable group of Americans went. We helped in the tobacco harvest that one year.
Yeah.
And we were in this camp, bunkhouses and so on. And in the middle of this camp, this one evening, there was an argument. And I came upon it, and there was this white guy from, I think, the West Coast, who had been to one of the early Venceremos raids in 1970 or so. And he was running on about how there's still people here in the countryside that are living, they have thatched roofs and dirt floors, and the person that was arguing with him was this African American woman from inner city Philadelphia, and her bottom line was, do you see anyone here, in all the places we've been, do you see anyone here living in a fucking cardboard box?
Yeah.
Right. Not a one.
Yeah.
The current situation in Venezuela, you don't know what's going to be. But I will argue that what Guaido and these, upper class Venezuelans promise is a false promise. That whatever exists in Venezuela now, for the popular classes, it cannot, it will get worse if these reactionaries, if this right comes to power. beholden to the U.S. and beholden to U.S. financial institutions, and so on. But certainly, and there's, the game plan is the same. You deepen the social crisis through economic pressures. We hear about the word sanctions. I was saying earlier that what is sanctions? That's a nondescriptive word. You cut off credit, you withhold payment for the oil, and so on.
I've been hearing a little bit about that.
And then complete with economic sabotage, actual physical sabotage. The same was true in 53 in Iran, 54 in Guatemala, 72-3 in Chile. Wherever you want to look, where once the determination, the decision is made that this regime, such and such regime has to go, then the resurrection, the resuscitation of a guy like Elliot Abrams, who was a key architect of the vicious contra-wars against Nicaragua and El Salvador in the 80s.
He's cool now?
They've given him this title of, I forget what it is. It's an emissary of some sort. And I keep on thinking, when I think of him and knowing of that earlier history, I think that they opened a crypt. They removed the wooden stake from his heart. It came out.
Came back out.
Came alive. But Bolton,
that's how I
and
felt.
Abrams and Pompeo, and I mean, talk about, oh man.
Well, that's what I heard. I thought about when I learned about Roger Stone and his background and how he was like a young guy and involved in like Watergate and shit. Like you see this like picture of him like with this dumb grin on his face like then. Like, oh, I like this shady shit.
Oh, there's bunches of those.
And he just pops up again later.
Yeah, they how old's Henry Kissinger now? Every time I see a picture of him, I think, only the good die young.
Only the good. So folks who are like going to, it has a different name now, but I guess they should go to Venezuela now and fight for Maduro, or I'm just like, what's your position on that?
Well, interestingly, I interviewed a young man who I knew here in Madison. A program about 4, 5, maybe 2 months ago. A returnee from Rojava, who was a combatant in the International Brigadista.
Oh, okay.
And good.
Not that they're on Leninists that go and fight in Roosevelt too, and everything.
No, there's. He actually talked about that in the interview. You can listen to.
Yeah, that's interesting. When I'm check it out.
He talked about various. Not just the fighting, which there's international brigades of several different stripe.
Yeah.
But also the political and social revolution going on in those zones that are now, of course, under severe attack by that other humanitarian regime called Turkey. So I have heard just in the past few days that there are internationalists that have gone to Venezuela, and of course the Cubans have been there. That story's not told about the thousands and thousands of doctors and technicians of various description that have been in places like Venezuela. Or if you look at the battle against apartheid South Africa, in the liberation struggles in Southern Africa in the 70s, 80s, thousands of Cubans went and fought on the side of liberation forces in Angola and Mozambique. And of course it was described here by the power in the States by the powers that be that those Cubans in Africa are just surrogates of the Soviets.
Right.
But the
Oh yeah,
but the
that's
Cubans,
always
yeah,
how
but
it's
the
framed.
the,
Yeah.
but the Cuban perspective on it was, that they're a kind of cross-Atlantic African solidarity.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. They're fighting for their
Yeah.
right to
You know,
self-determination.
Right. Well, in
Yeah.
much the same way that those Americans, including several from Wisconsin and Clarence Kalin out of Madison, went to fight as part of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade in the fight against fascism in Spain, against Franco. And they were dubbed at the time by J. Edgar Hoover as premature anti-fascists.
Uh-huh.
That was the,
Social
What does that
fascism.
even mean?
No. That they were just that it was
Premature.
okay later on.
Okay, I got
but,
you.
but the commies were premature in their, because the United States really didn't have any problem with technically neutral while providing oil to the Franco regime and so on.
Yeah, yeah. It wasn't until like some atrocities were uncovered that, well, and Pearl Harbor and all that. But,
Once the alliance was forged, then it was don't forget that people too easily forget that the Soviet Union was our ally in World War II. Say as many as 22 million people.
Wow.
Well, yeah, that and like we have a different relationship with that war because of the fact that we don't have, like, besides Pearl Harbor, we don't have like decimated cities from it.
Yeah.
Like we have like it's like we have a level of disconnection from it that you can't have if you're in Europe.
Yeah, well,
You at least it's the horrors of war are more of a reality in the sense that like you can see it in your like town.
I mean, it's the real jumping off place for the Pax Americana, post-war American Empire.
Yeah.
It's the only major power that comes out of the war basically unscathed.
Yeah,
Even-
yeah.
There's people who like to.
My
there's
favorite
a
war to talk
well,
about.
yeah. Well, there's a mythology that it was America won the war.
Yeah,
And
right.
if
Yeah,
you look
yeah.
at the minute percentage of casualties that the U.S. gave up, in contrast to what I just mentioned, whether it be certainly the Soviet Union at the time, or even as a percentage of the populations, it's minuscule. But it also, its industrial plant was not touched whatsoever, as you allude to. Bankrolled it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Then Japanese and German infrastructures destroyed, created this convenient space for us to sort of take over global economics.
Yeah, well, that it did.
Well, just say the Bush's grandfather was like running a bank that like helped had a bunch of accounts with the Nazis up until they were forced to stop by the government. They're like, hey, you can't do banking with the Nazis anymore. But that was like their grandpa or whatever. I think it's maybe Bush Senior's dad or grandpa. But
Yeah.
it's like we've we've always been right there
Well,
on the sidelines with it.
through the thick and thin of it, IG Farben, the major German chemical firm that gave us both Bayer aspirin and Cyclone D, the poison that was used at Auschwitz,
Oh no.
right?
Yeah.
During the thick and thin of it, they transferred their patents to DuPont, safekeeping on this side of the Atlantic.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
All that kind of the major patent attorneys that were central to all of that were John Foster and Alan Dulles, both of whom had been with Wilson at Versailles as young men in 1919. Alan Dulles later goes on to become the first head of the CIA, and his brother John Foster was Secretary of State under Eisenhower.
Yeah.
But they, oh yeah, by the way, they also were legacy enrollees at Yale and Harvard. And so on and so
Yeah,
forth.
yeah.
They didn't have Photoshop at the time. They didn't have to
Uh-huh.
pretend to be members of sports teams.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, we do have like a couple examples of that in the U.S. of like political dynastyism. You know, we got like, whether it be the Kennedys, the Clintons, the Bushes, everyone likes to point out if they're a descendant from Lincoln. You know, they're like, hey, did my aunt still have this kind of almost feudal framing of certain leaders and
Well,
families?
of course, FDR was Teddy Roosevelt's cousin.
Oh, the Roosevelts, yeah.
And the one in that clan, that lineage that all brings it back is that excuse me. At the height of the Iran crisis of 53, 54, the U.S. and the Brits engineering the overthrow of democratically elected Mohammad Mossadegh, the CIA was running operations to destabilize the regime, and Kermit Roosevelt, who was Teddy Roosevelt's, let's say grandson, and part of the clan.
Yeah.
He was in the diplomatic corps. I'm not sure if he was ambassador, but I may have been. It's been a while since I looked at that stuff. But there's, this story of his flying from Washington with suitcases with containing $2 million in cash.
Oh, back then?
And it was dispersed to these gangs, these crowds, these mafias that ran the bazaars to pay for mass demonstrations. One of the money went, I'm sure they didn't give out $2 million to these poor bazaar.
No, they probably kept a chunk of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that kind of chicanery, that kind of
Yeah.
Machine politics.
and the CIA, coming together 53 Iran and 54 Guatemala.
Yeah.
Prior to the disclosures of the Church-Hearing Committee on CIA chicanery during the Vietnam era, their spokespersons would boast about their success stories in Guatemala and Iran as being the first really great coups. That word coup. There you go.
Yeah.
Keep
Yeah.
coming
Yeah.
out.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's countless coups.
Yeah.
Yeah. Central and South America
That brings
and
up
beyond.
the term quisling. Y'all know what that means? Hear that?
Quisling.
Well, yeah. It's just like like you just described one. Who was it that had to cease and desist, taking Nazi money and whatnot. But then that also brings let's go back to Venezuela again, because I don't know, like, it's called the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, right? So like, does Venezuela have any relationship with, what is it, Spain, right? They had a revolution from Spain,
Right,
like,
no, well, Simón Bolívar was the one of the great liberators
yeah,
of South America in the wars for independence from Spain. Sure.
Wait, who was that?
Simón Bolívar.
Oh, yeah, I think I remember
so
studying.
Bolivia is named after it. Venezuela's actually called the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
Oh.
Right. Yeah. The Chavistas look to that longer history as a kind of determination to be independent.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, okay, I guess I was more asking about, like, the geopolitics of Venezuela, because obviously you mentioned Cuba, and then, is there, like, North Korea involved, or, like, what kind of connections? They're just pretty much isolated, like, economically, besides Cuba, or?
Well, it's interesting because Mexico hasn't gone along with the Lima
The
group.
Lima, right.
Uruguay has not
Yeah.
gone along.
Two kind of, like, pink-ish leaders.
Ecuador, obviously. So it's interesting as well. There's been some reports now that since President Obrador of Mexico has not fallen in line, that they're targeting him as well.
Oh, okay.
And then there's this, they come up with these terms, this troika of terrorist.
Tyranny or
Yeah, yes. The troika of tyranny.
Got some
Nicaragua,
alliteration.
yeah.
Yeah.
Nicaragua. Well, what was the other one prior? North Korea, Iran, and Iraq.
Oh, the axis.
Axis of evil.
Axis of evil. Yeah. I was about to say. Yeah.
And it's, the figure. They love to play with the words.
Well, it's I think it's almost our obsession with like superheroes reflects that in our culture. We like to, I don't know, we like things to be really exciting. We like extremes, and I don't know. We're obsessed with right and wrong, good and evil. We like those kind of like black and white kind of stories.
In hand in hand with empire building, with American expansion to the west, and then jumping off into the Pacific. Who were the earlier superheroes? Cowboys.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
The guys that won the West. 50s.
Yeah.
Walt Disney was one of these freebooting mass murderers in the war that Jackson led against the Creek.
Yeah.
And we get this mythology of the Alamo. Well,
remember the Alamo.
The Mexican American War was nothing but a provoked provocation that led to one of the biggest land grabs in the history of the United States.
Yeah, that's why we remember it.
And but it's portrayed. I grew up that all these guys, Jim Bowie and Davy Crockett, and all these guys, they were the heroes, often played by John Wayne or somebody like that. I can remember.
Well, and I've been really into Marvel stuff lately, so I've been watching a few documentaries. But like a lot of the earlier like Marvel and like DC guys were fans of those cowboy things. Like I'm blanking on them right now, but Roy Rogers, is that one?
Rogers, yep.
There's that's what a lot of the early comic book writers drew inspiration directly from cowboys
and then
stories.
Think about DC Comics came up. Superman was an anti-fascist thing, so there was like a sort of imperialist undertones there, and like.
Well, there was
was Captain America first?
I don't know.
Because like I remember there was a famous like picture of like Captain America punching Hitler in the face. Like that was their like big like
maybe Captain America
introduction into, because their comics were originally about World War II. I think it was before all everything was done with that even that Captain America made it on the scene. But
perpetuating the ideologies, dominant ideologies through the popular culture is essential.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You go to any of these superhero films, the weaponry, the artillery, the hardware, the planes, the jets, the tanks, and so on. That's all Pentagon subsidy. Right? That's the intermeshing of the synergy between the entertainment industry and the military-industrial complex.
Well, especially if you're watching like a Michael Bay film. Like Michael Bay films are like they're like military advertisements start to finish. You know what I mean? Like Transformers films and all that. Like there's just so much. They spend so much time like looking at all the equipment of a job, like talking about some of the moral problems with that a little bit with their movies. But like it is still in that world of superheroes and non-superheroes. You know what I mean?
I can recall seeing Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, and we always have to have another war film every so many years.
But in this big theater, I was sitting there with this buddy of mine, and we watched it. And for both of us, it's, you know, to me, it had this kind of anti-war subtext, the futility of it all, the insanity of it all. But when the lights went up in the theater, sitting down way in front of us, like very close to the screen, was this young man who, from a distance, I would say, by what he just witnessed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
heroic stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. The heroism
Yeah.
aspect of it. Yeah.
And intertwined with, of course, that story that all basic training inculcates in any soldier, any Marine, is what matters is your buddy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's all
You don't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or it's all, there's no politics, no history. There's just survival when it comes down to it, and the fraternity of the fight is very remarkable, inculcated into.
Buddy that falls, you know, it really affects you. It really impacts you, you know, like, and you know, especially after that point, you know, because I mean, maybe before that point, you know, it's not as permanent, you know, but then, you know, once you actually experience it, and then it's like it makes you believe the kind of survivalistic. Once you go through war, you're like, oh yeah, life. You do need to be in survival mode all the time, because that can happen. And so, you know, it affects their, you know, their worldview a little bit.
Yeah, but blow it out, it kind of ties back to what we were talking about before, because if you expand it out, extrapolate it out to a culture of trauma, which is American growth, expansion, conquest, race and class. Actually talked about this, their errand or mission in the wilderness, as if there was no one else here.
Yeah, no, even history books sometimes do a bad job of talking about the fact that there was civilization here before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the you know, within a very short time after the first Thanksgiving, those very same English settlers are very busy wiping out the Pequots and the Wampanoag and the down into Connecticut, Rhode Island. You know, just the horror story jumps off there. There's a very wonderful book by this historian called Robert Drinan called Facing West, and it has this funny subtitle which I can't recall offhand, but it tracks Indian fighting
Like,
as part of the American psyche, part of the American legacy, conquering the savages,
the Cowboys and Indians.
going from pre-Plymouth, so 1620, through to Vietnam.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's been a real core part of our mythos.
Sure.
For a
That's
long
exactly
time.
the word I was looking for.
Yeah. Well, because like, oh man, they do a good job of explaining it in the people's history of the United States. But yeah, like the one of the, you know, the first time that Columbus encountered those peoples, he basically, like, the first thing he thought of was like, oh man, those people would be easy to enslave. They're so nice. They're so you know, willing to work together. You know, they're so, you know, and he just immediately looked at them like they were animals. Like we started at a bad place.
I think it's, I may be wrong with this, but I think it was Mark Twain who quipped at one point where he said, referring to the Pilgrims, he said, well, excuse me, first we fell upon our knees, and then we fell upon the indigenes.
Yeah, well, because that's always the, like, the knife in the back, you know, the fact that, like, they helped us survive to start out, and then we just turned around and, you know, we just took over everything.
There's definitely some othering that probably happened, but there's also like a set of specific economic circumstances too that helped along with the enslaving of folks too. So like, you know, what Columbus, what was, I don't know, what do you think he was thinking, oh, get slaves, or was he thinking, got to get that gold?
I don't think he was. I don't think he was thinking about the gold yet.
You don't think
well,
so?
That was Cortez. That was Cortez.
Well, if you go to the cathedral in Sevilla in Spain, you go into this, you know, it's a classic European cathedral, Catholic cathedral.
Yeah.
And when you go down the center, there's this great big, well, the central aisle.
The
and the main-
Sagrada
and-
Familia one? No,
No, no.
Sevilla, okay.
Yeah, in Sevilla. But you go down this long central aisle,
Yeah.
and straight ahead is the altar and so on. And behind the altar is a relief, a bas relief, about, I would say about 40 feet high, more, probably maybe 50, 60 feet high.
Yeah.
And maybe about 80 feet across, and it's solid gold.
Oh.
This relief behind
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And if you look stage one, monument, and who was it for? Columbus,
Mm.
right?
Of course.
Yeah, it was conquest. It was territorial gain. It was resources. It
Uh-huh.
was you know, Spanish again. By that time, of course, already seeing itself.
Well, yeah, that was the name of the game. Like, that was the colonial age, you know? Like, everyone was just like, I'm gonna take over as much crap as I can, put my flag on the ground, and call it a day.
Yeah, there's I'm rattling off historians here tonight. There's this new book, a very marvelous book called Common Wind by Julius Scott, A History of the Caribbean in the age of the Haitian Revolution.
Yeah.
And this competition, of course, of all the European powers for control of ports, islands, lands for plantations, resources, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
The Brits, the French, the Spaniards being the major players, but the Dutch and the Danish, and etc.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
at one point in the 1700s, early or late 60s, the Caribbean was all honeycombed with ships and of all sorts. And so the word goes out
Spanish
that
Armada.
anyone coming over from slaves that can successfully make it to Spanish territory and proclaim their desire to become Catholic, fleeing Protestant British control, would be free. Right? So they created this kind of antagonism, shall we say?
Yeah.
People
yeah.
fleeing from Jamaica over to going to Puerto Rico or Cuba
Dominican Republic.
and so on.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
You know, it's very fantastic, brand new book just out from Verso Press that I'm right in the middle of right now. It's a great read. People are touting it as one of the most significant books that period of history in the Caribbean since maybe C.L.R. James' Black Jacobin.
Okay. There's one I listened to. I forgot the author, but it kind of gets into the nitty gritty of like our colonization and Haiti stuff, Caribbean stuff, all of our meddlings in different places essentially, and how we
The C.L.R. James' Black Jacobin about the Haitian Revolution was published in 1938, the same year that Black Reconstruction, Du Bois's masterwork, is
Oh
published.
wow. Damn.
Yeah,
It's an important year, huh?
Yeah, there's I think, I might be wrong, but I think that was the year that Gone with the Wind was published as well.
Oh wow. That does sound like a pretty significant year. Well, I mean,